My mother stood up at Sunday dinner and announced my brother was moving his family into my house, so I made sure they arrived to find the door already belonged to someone else. My name is Alex Mitchell. I was 34 and living a perfectly ordinary life until the second Sunday of June, when everything I thought I knew about my place in this world got rewritten. We were sitting around my parents' dining table, the one with the good linen and the slightly burnt rolls that are family tradition. My dad was doing his typical impression of a silent statue, and my brother Jake was busy not helping with anything. My mom Linda, she stood up with that particular clink of a water glass, the one she uses to command silence before delivering what she considers good news. She tapped her glass twice. "Your father and I have wonderful news," she said, her church voice in full effect. "Jake and the children will be moving into Alex's house on July 11th. I just sat there, green beans halfway to my mouth. No one asked me. Not my brother, not my Aunt Carol, who nodded like a bobblehead. Not even my father, who stared at his pot roast like it held the secrets to the universe. I didn't say a word. I just passed the vegetables and let the silence settle around me like a familiar coat. Here's the thing they didn't know, and I'll tell you why that silence wasn't quite what it seemed. 2 days before that dinner, I had been sitting in a title office across town, signing my name until my hand ached. The house on Maple Street was already sold. I had done it all on my own, in the quietest way possible. No for sale sign in the yard, no social media announcement, just paperwork, a handshake, and a young couple named the Hendersons who were thrilled to finally own a home. My family had no idea. They'd been busy planning a move that was never going to happen, using a set of keys my mother had copied without asking. And that rented box truck they were so excited about was driving toward a door that no longer belonged to me. That truck was just the beginning of a story that would end at my mother's kitchen table a few days later, and the fallout is something I still think about when I can't sleep. Welcome to Zarabell Stories, where the quiet ones finally have their say. We share tales of family, boundaries, and the moments that change the course of our lives. If you've ever felt like the one who keeps the peace while everyone else keeps taking, then this story is for you. Maple Street was my home for 7 years. A modest 1952 bungalow I bought when I was 27 for $68,000. I bought that house with 7 years of Saturdays. I'd saved every penny of that down payment by working tax seasons while my friends went on spring break. I'm a CPA, I do math for a living. But that house was more than numbers. I refinished the oak floors myself, on my knees with a rented sander. I planted peonies along the front walk, the same fat pink ones my grandmother used to grow. When the porch step cracked, I watched a YouTube video and fixed it myself. I had been the one to build that home, stone by stone. No one in my family had ever helped me move in. In 7 years, they never sat down for a single meal under my roof. That's just how it worked in the Mitchell family. I always had to go to them. Sunday dinner was non-negotiable at my parents' place. If I had offered to host a holiday, it would have felt like I was trying to be the center of attention, which wasn't my role. My mother had stepped foot inside my house exactly 4 times. Remember that number because it tells you everything you need to know about what happened next. By May of that year, my little bungalow was quiet. The peonies were starting to bloom, and I had a secret I was keeping safe in a folder on my desk. I was leaving. My firm had asked me to lead a new office up north, about 50 miles away, and I'd said yes before they even finished the sentence. A promotion, a salary bump, my name on the door, it was everything I'd earned. My friend Dana, who sells real estate, introduced me to the Hendersons. We had a private walkthrough while the neighbors were at work. One clean offer of $265,000, and we closed on a Friday in June. They were kind enough to let me rent the house back for a month so I could pack and wrap things up at the office. For 30 days, I was a tenant in my own home, and I didn't mind it at all. I'd already put a deposit on a little blue cottage by the lake, close enough to the new office to hear the geese arguing in the morning. I practiced my big reveal for Sunday dinner. I got a promotion. I sold the house. I'm moving in July. I rehearsed it in the shower, in the car, everywhere I went. I never got to say it. To understand why I kept quiet, you have to understand the role I've always played in this family. I wasn't just the daughter or the sister, I was the staff. I'd been doing my parents' taxes since I was 19. When their roof failed years ago, the check for repairs came from my savings, and my mother called me a blessing, then never mentioned it again. When Jake's marriage fell apart, I was the one sorting his paperwork while he scrolled through phone highlights on the couch. Jake is the kind of guy who has always had things arranged for him. He'd lost his job 8 months before all this, moved back in with our parents, and his kids stayed with their mom, Tessa, most of the time. I loved those kids fiercely, Ellie, who's 8, and Sam, who's 5. In our family, there were two types of children, the ones who needed everything, and the one who made sure everything got handled. I was the one who held it together. I guess you can figure out which one I was. I'd given my mother a spare key for emergencies years ago. She kept it in her junk drawer with a paper tag. I knew the shape of my family long before that dinner, which is why I built my exit so quietly. I didn't announce my plans because I knew someone would try to talk me out of them. The paperwork was my way of locking the door before the wind could blow it open. That first Sunday in June was so ordinary it felt staged. My mother's dining room in Kettering, the same tablecloth, the smell of pot roast and rolls. My seat was closest to the kitchen because I was always the one who had to jump up to refill the gravy. Jake got served first, that's just how things always went. Sam was telling a long, rambling story about a frog, and Ellie was drawing horses on a napkin beside me. I remember feeling a bittersweet tenderness. This was the last ordinary dinner, and I was the only one who knew it. I was arranging the words in my head to give them the news gently when my mother stood up and clinked her glass with a spoon. "Your father and I have wonderful news," she said, and she smiled right at Jake. Something in my stomach went cold. When she says wonderful, it's never required my opinion. "We've decided," she announced, "that Jake and the children will move into Alex's house on July 11th. She said it like she was announcing a graduation. She'd already assigned the rooms. Ellie would get the front bedroom with the flowers, Sam would take the small one, and Jake would get the master. She'd mapped out a space she'd visited only 4 times in 7 years. She'd even told the church. My father stared at his pot roast. Aunt Carol clucked her tongue about how wonderful it was for the family. I opened my mouth, but 34 years of training shut it again. I passed the green beans and said nothing. The paperwork I'd signed 2 days ago was the only voice I had left. Why didn't I just stand up and say the house was sold? I've asked myself that 1,000 times. Here's the truth, laid out like a ledger. First, reflex. When your job is to absorb things, your throat learns the rules before your brain can object. My silence at that table wasn't a plan, it was muscle memory with a 34-year warranty. Second, strategy. If I'd announced it right there, my mother wouldn't have heard a fact. She'd have heard a problem with 5 weeks left to solve it. There would have been family meetings, Aunt Carol showing up with casseroles, and Ellie looking at me with those sad eyes, asking why I didn't want them. I didn't want my last month at Maple Street to turn into a battlefield. Third, the part I'm less proud of, I still wanted a soft landing. I planned to tell them the next week, in private, with no audience for my mother to perform for. I gave myself 1 week. My mother gave me 3 days. The phone started ringing on Wednesday. My mother didn't call to ask, she called to coordinate. "July 11th is confirmed," she said. "Aunt Carol's renting the box truck. We'll start with the kids' furniture. You'll want to move your chair to the basement. You don't use that room anyway." I stood in my own kitchen while my furniture was being redistricted. "Mom, I tried. We need to talk about the house." She steamrolled right over me. "Oh, honey, don't worry about cleaning. Pastor Jim's wife already heard the news and thinks it's beautiful what you're doing for your brother." My mother had already made me the heroine of a story I hadn't agreed to star in. I called her Thursday, asked if I could come by. She said yes, but rescheduled me for a church rummage sale. That told me exactly where I ranked. Then Jake texted, "Gonna swing by to look at rooms. What time works?" When I got home, he was sitting on my porch swing like he'd already claimed it. He walked me around my own yard, pointing out where his weight bench would go and how he'd have to get rid of my peonies for a trampoline down the road. Down the road on my deed. He wasn't even gloating. It wasn't in him to be cruel. He just believed the rooms were his because our mother had said so. The next Sunday, I skipped dinner for the first time in years and took my niece and nephew for ice cream instead. I picked them up from Tessa's. Sam was wearing a cape for reasons he wouldn't explain. Ellie slid into the booth with her sketchbook and showed me a drawing. A house with a triangle roof, pink flowers along the walk, 2 stick kids, and 1 stick lady with brown hair. At the top she'd written, "Aunt Alex's house. Grandma says we get to live there," Sam announced through a mouthful of sprinkles. "Are you gonna still be there?" Ellie asked quieter, watching my face with that unnerving 8-year-old perception. They'd been told, of course. My mother had made sure of it. I bought them more sprinkles and said the house was full of surprises. It was the truest sentence I could offer without shattering their expectations. I folded that drawing carefully and put it in my bag. It stayed with me through everything that followed, like a splinter I couldn't remove. The following Thursday, I finally got my audience. I drove to my parents' house after work with a folder in my bag, a one-page summary of what I wanted to say. My mother poured decaf, and I sat down at the kitchen table. Mom, Dad, before anything happens with July, there's something you need to know about the house. I barely got the words out before her hand went up like a stop sign. Alex Marie, she said, please don't do this. Make it hard. And then came the flood. After everything this family has done for you, your brother is drowning, those babies need a yard, you have so much. She squeezed my wrist. My father evaporated into the garage, which is where Mitchell men go during family storms. I looked at my mother and realized she wasn't in a conversation. She was in a ceremony. Facts wouldn't be received, they'd be filed as a tax. I put my folder back in my bag and said, fine, Mom. I had to go. It was not fine. But I had a plan. The next week, the family campaign went door to door. Monday, a text from Aunt Carol. Truck reserved. So proud of you. Tuesday, at the pharmacy, Pastor Jim's wife cornered me in the vitamin aisle and told me what a blessing I was. Wednesday, Jake sent a photo of bunk beds on clearance with 3 thumbs-up emojis. Thursday, my mother called about a recipe and managed to say it again. Empty rooms are a sin, honey, when families are sleeping on couches. My house had been rezoned into a moral emergency, and everyone I knew had been handed a shovel. That's how it works in a family like mine. Nobody tears you down with cruelty. They bury you in warmth, one spoonful of praise at a time, until you're in a hole and everyone agrees you climbed in yourself. I kept my voice pleasant and my sentences short. Every night, I crossed off another day on my calendar. 13 days left. I stopped feeling guilty. I felt organized. My boxes were already going north, 2 carloads at a time. My files, then the good pans. Nobody ever visited, so nobody noticed my bookshelves going bare. Tessa asked me to coffee at the end of June. She slid a school transfer packet across the table, forms for Ellie half filled out in my mother's perfect handwriting. My address, printed in ink by a woman who'd never asked me a question with a blank in it. I just want them stable, Tessa said. Is this house thing actually happening? I told her the truth. No. The house is sold. I close in a month. She leaned back, laughed once, and said, good for you. She told me she'd divorced more than my brother, she divorced the whole weather system. She promised to keep it quiet, and I believed her. Driving home, I realized my hands were steady on the wheel. Someone else knew the truth, and the sky hadn't fallen. Sam's 5th birthday party was at the end of June. Streamers, a dinosaur cake, 2 dozen people from church. I was cutting cake in the kitchen when my mother clinked her glass again. That sound had started to work on me like a smoke alarm. Before the cake goes around, she announced, one more present, and this one's for Daddy. From her apron pocket she produced a set of new brass keys tied with a red ribbon. I had copies made from my spare, she said. So July 11th, you just drive right up and walk right into your new home. The folding chairs applauded. Sam grabbed for the keys. Ellie, standing beside me, looked up and asked, are those the keys to your house, Aunt Alex? I looked down at her face and out at the room. My mother flushed with generosity, handing out copies of my front door like party favors. The key I had given her for emergencies. In her dictionary, an emergency was when the family needed what you had. They are Grandma's copies, sweetheart, I told Ellie. It was the truth, in every way. Keys to a door that in 2 weeks wouldn't exist for any of us. The last week of June, I came home early and knew something was wrong before I got inside. The back door was unlocked, and I never leave doors unlocked. My kitchen chairs were out of place. There was a tape measure on the windowsill. 2 sets of shoe prints on the floor I'd mopped. My phone buzzed. Hey, we measured the kids' rooms real quick. Back door sticks, LOL. He'd used the party keys. My own brother, walking through my home without knocking. The cold that comes over you when your space has been rearranged by people who never asked. I stood there a long time. And then I made a list. Accountants always make a list. The things that mattered went into my car that night. My grandmother's quilt, my files, the drawing from my purse. More carloads went north that week. And I called the Hendersons to tell them the full story. They met me at the coffee shop and listened without panic. Claire Henderson asked 2 questions. Did the copied keys work? Yes. Were any of these people dangerous? No, just certain. They'd already scheduled a locksmith for possession day. We'll be kind and we'll be clear, Claire said. Kind and clear. I spent 34 years being kind on behalf of people who mistook it for consent. My last night at Maple Street was the 2nd of July. The rooms were empty and huge, the way rooms get when your voice starts echoing. I mopped the oak floors one more time, not because the Hendersons needed it, but because you should hand things over better than you got them. I ate dinner standing at the counter, pizza on a paper towel, and let myself remember, 27 years old, signing papers I could barely afford. The first night on an air mattress in the flower room. The winter the furnace quit and I cried alone and then fixed it alone. That house had never been empty. It was full of me. Out front in the dark, I dug up one fat clump of peonies from the end of the row and potted it for the cottage. Then I set my keys on the counter for Dana to hand to the Hendersons. All of them, the originals. I let the lock click me out of 7 years of my life. You can love a thing and still refuse to let it be taken. Sometimes leaving is how you keep what matters. I was in the car when my phone buzzed. A family group chat from my mother. Moving day, July 11th. 9 a.m. Pizza after. Confetti emojis. I put the phone face down and drove north. The night of July 10th, I sat on my new porch with a draft text to my mother. The house is sold. It closed in June. Please don't bring the truck. I hovered over send for a long time. I'd been this family's airbag for my entire life, inflating first so no one else felt the crash. Sending that text would have been another deployment. If I sent it, the truck would be cancelled, but by Sunday my mother would have a new campaign. The sale money, family meetings about what I owed Jake. If I didn't send it, tomorrow would be ugly, public, and unforgettable. The one thing my family couldn't believe was that things worked out because Alex handled it. I deleted the draft, letter by letter, and turned off the porch light. That night, for the first time, I let the car hit the wall. At 8:40 the next morning, my phone rang. It was Ellie's small voice, wobbling. Aunt Alex, why is there a strange lady in your house? I was already dressed. I'd been up since 6. Sweetheart, put your daddy on. I was in the car before Jake's voice came on, confused. Alex, what is going on? Some woman won't open your door. 50 minutes, I told him. Don't do anything loud. When I turned onto Maple Street, the scene was absolute chaos. Aunt Carol's rented box truck was angled across the driveway, a sectional halfway down the ramp like a beached whale. My mother stood at the front door in her church blouse, knocking with her flat hand, calling my name into a house that didn't contain me. Jake was on the porch step, jabbing his shiny brass key at the new deadbolt over and over, the red ribbon still on the ring. In the doorway stood Claire Henderson in her scrubs, calm as a nurse. I'm so sorry, but this is our home. We closed a month ago. My mother laughed at her. Honey, no. This is my daughter's house. Claire repeated it, slower. And then my tires crunched the curb. Every head on that lawn rotated toward me in one motion. I crossed that lawn in 10 steps in 34 years. Tessa's car pulled up behind mine, and she'd already taken the kids away for ice cream so they wouldn't see the worst of it. My mother met me halfway. Alex, tell this woman there's been a mistake. I said, there's no mistake, Mom. I sold the house a month ago. It was never the family's to fill. The yard went so quiet I could hear the truck's ramp ticking in the heat. My mother's face searched every page in her book and found nothing. Then she said the only sentence she had left. We fill empty rooms, Alex. That is what family does. Her scripture. And for the first time, I heard it for what it was, not a description of love, but a zoning ordinance. David Henderson stepped up and asked them to move the truck. Jake stood on the porch of a stranger's house, staring at his ribboned keys. My father stepped close to me and spoke quietly. Your grandmother had a piano. That was all. It stopped me cold. The retreat wasn't graceful. Aunt Carol's truck gears ground as she backed off the driveway. Boxes went back up the ramp in silence, carried by David Henderson, who was a genuinely decent man. My mother didn't help. She stood by the peonies, Claire's peonies now, arranging her face for the neighbors. Then she got in Carol's cab without looking at me. Jake left his keys on the porch rail. I stayed behind because someone owed the Hendersons an apology. I'm so sorry about your Saturday, I said. Claire shook her head. You warned us. You did it right. I drove north with the windows down. My phone showed 2 screens of missed calls and a voicemail icon like a lit fuse. My mother had texted. Family meeting Tuesday 6 p.m. You owe your brother that much. I set the phone down and looked out at the lake. There's that word again, I thought. Bring the ledger then. I'm good with ledgers. Sunday and Monday, the family court convened without me. Aunt Carol. I've never been so embarrassed. The church saw everything. A cousin I barely knew. So the kids are just homeless now? Pastor Jim's wife slid into my DMs with prayer emojis. My mother posted once. Some people get rich selling their family out the back door. Then silence, which from her is artillery. Not one person asked where I was going to live or if I was okay. The audit only runs in one direction. Tessa called Monday night. Don't you dare fold. The kids were never homeless, they live with me. Moving into your place was about Jake getting the school district and Linda getting them 7 minutes away. It was never shelter. It was strategy. The emergency had been a set piece. The drowning man had a boat the whole time. Tuesday, I found my father in the garage, under the hood of a mower that didn't need him. I asked about the piano. He wiped his hands and gave me the missing chapter. In 1989, my grandmother passed, and there was a house and a piano my mother played beautifully. Her brother had just had a son, so my grandfather sat my mother down and explained how it would go, the house to Jean for the family name, the piano to stay with the house. She signed the papers on Friday. She never played again. She never complained. She decided that swallowing it was the same as loving them. My mother wasn't punishing me for having something, she was punishing me for refusing to give it up. Because if I could say no and the sky held, then she could have said no, too. And she hadn't. I walked into the kitchen for the meeting. My mother sat at the head with a legal pad of figures underlining $60,000. Jake sat at her right hand. Ellie's school transfer packet sat across from my chair. You got lucky on that house, she said. $60,000 puts your brother in a rental and pays off his truck. Sign it, and no hard feelings about the little stunt. She slid the paper toward me. I didn't touch it. The kids live with Tessa, I said. They always have, don't they? My mother's voice dropped to its sweetest register. Where those children sleep is a family matter. Sign the check, and everything goes back to how it was. Or you can explain to yourself why you chose money over ever seeing them again. She touched Jake's sleeve. He looked at the floor. And then I opened my bag and took out my own papers. Education savings accounts for each child, funded in my name, $200 a month until they are 18. That money goes to them directly. It can't be borrowed against. It can't be redistributed. My door is open to your kids every weekend, I said to Jake. That's what I give. It just doesn't come through her anymore. The kitchen went silent. My mother's voice cracked. I gave up everything for this family. Everything. For a second, I saw her at 26, and my heart broke for that girl. Then she knocked my papers off the table. That's not family, she said. That's paperwork. And she said, then you are not my daughter. Get out of my house. I bent down and picked up my pages. I set them back in the center of the table. The accounts are open either way. This isn't a negotiation, Mom. It's just true. I looked at her and said the last thing I ever said in that house. I was never an empty room, Mom. None of your children were. You just never asked what was inside. I walked out past the rooster clock, through the door I'd walked through since I was a child. My father followed me onto the back steps and gripped my shoulder. 1989, he said. I stood in the yard that day too. I should have said something. Twice now. I covered his hand with mine. Then I reached my car, alone on the gravel, and my phone buzzed. It was Tessa. The kids have been asking about the lake all week. Saturday? I sat in my car and cried for about a minute and a half, not the sad kind. The kind you do when you set down a suitcase full of rocks you forgot you were carrying. I typed back. Saturday. Here's the honest accounting of the months after. My mother kept her word. My chair at Sunday dinner stayed empty through August, September, October. She tells the church I abandoned the family. Aunt Carol invoiced me for the moving truck, $180, and I paid it with a memo line that said, for the truck, not the guilt. The group chat went quiet around me, then simply went on without me. Some losses are quiet like that. But every first of the month, 2 transfers go out to 2 education accounts. In September, a thank you card arrived in Ellie's handwriting, organized by Tessa. Jake found a 2-bedroom apartment and a forklift job with weekends off, arranged by himself. My father calls me every Thursday from the garage, voice low, mower running for cover. We talk about nothing for 10 minutes. From Roy Mitchell, that's a sonnet. I run an office with my name by the door. I drink coffee on a porch where the loudest argument is between geese. The peony clump I brought with me took to the soil like it had been waiting for the transfer paperwork. The second Saturday of October, a truck came up my gravel drive. Ellie and Sam spilled out in their capes and sketchbooks, shrieking down toward the water to boss the geese around. My brother came up the porch steps slowly, holding the brass keys, still on their ring, trailing a limp red ribbon. These don't open anything, he said. Figured you should be the one to throw them away. That was the whole apology. For a Mitchell man, It was the Gettysburg Address. I dropped the keys in my toolbox by the door and kept the ribbon.
Some receipts you keep. He stayed for burgers.
Sam fell asleep on my couch mid-cartoon, and Jake carried him to the spare room. He stood in the doorway a second, looking at the bed I keep made up, and said, "You didn't have to do any of this."
I know, I said.
That's the point. Inside, on my refrigerator, there's a drawing under a magnet, a house with a triangle roof, a row of pink blobs, 2 stick kids, 1 tall stick lady. Sometime that evening, Ellie took it down, made one small edit with a marker, and put it back straight.
Aunt Alex's lake house.
The flowers, she informed me, could stay in the picture since I'd brought them with me.
It's dark now as I tell you this, and the porch light is on.
2 kids are asleep down the hall in rooms nobody assigned. I used to believe love meant filling every room my family pointed at. Now I know a room is only worth filling when you're asked and free to answer. None of us were ever empty rooms. That's the whole inheritance I'm passing to Ellie, and it didn't cost $60,000.
So that's my story. 1 dinner where nobody asked.
1 set of keys that opened nothing. And 1 word, no, that finally opened everything. If someone in your life treats your future like the family's spare room, remember you're allowed to hold your own keys. Share this video with someone who needs that reminder. Drop a comment and tell me what you would have done at that kitchen table. And hit subscribe so you don't miss the next story from Zarabell Stories.
I'll see you in the next one.